Ahoy hoy, I'm Planarwalk, and it is very interesting here in New Zealand looking at other countries like America and the UK who have a lot of COVID vaccines available, but not all of those COVID vaccines are getting used. And as someone in New Zealand who can't get vaccinated because I'm not eligible yet, why are you letting so many vaccines that could have gone to other countries go to waste? Now, I do completely understand why. The government's decided, okay, we need to have enough vaccines to get everyone vaccinated, but a lot of the population said, yeah, we're just not going to get vaccinated, even if you have enough vaccines to vaccinate us. Now, I get it, people have heard all kinds of scary things about the vaccine, but every argument that I've heard against getting the vaccine has not been compelling to me. And I'm going to go through a lot of different arguments that I've heard. I might not be able to get all of them, and I'm going to explain why the arguments just don't convince me, and why they shouldn't convince you either. Please do share this video to anybody that is hesitant about getting a vaccine, as I believe that it is very important for everybody to get vaccinated. Now, let's start at the basics with a very simple argument. A lot of people don't like needles and find them scary, but it's only a tiny amount of pain, or at least any vaccination that I've gotten has been a slight pain in the arm, and afterwards, I'm good. Also, the pain from getting vaccinated is also rather fleeting. Much like if you have cough medicine that you don't like the flavour of, you just get it done quickly and then you don't have to worry about it. Now, I could say that a slight pain in the arm is way better than getting the effects of COVID, but that does bring me on to the next thing, and that is you may feel slightly ill after getting the jab. Now, it is true that after you get vaccinated, you may feel ill. However, if you get COVID, you may also feel ill, and the effects could be way worse than getting the vaccine. I've heard all kinds of horror stories from people who have gotten COVID. There are people that thought they were going to die because they found it so difficult to breathe. And let's not brush over the fact that there are 4 million people in the world that have died from COVID. That's not a small amount of people. And let's not forget that there are people that got COVID-19 a long time ago and just still haven't recovered. I'd much rather have a slight pain in the arm and feel ill for a couple of days than have the worst effects of COVID-19 and potentially die. Now, if every concern was just like that, I think would be fine. People would come to understand that it's in their best interests to get vaccinated. However, a lot of the concerns are based on misunderstandings and misinformation. So let's get to those concerns. Hello and good evening. I am Pauline Carenson, and you are watching the Box News, one of the last news sources left that tells it like it is and gives you the facts so that you can make up your own mind. Tonight on the program, we're going to be talking about vaccines, and do you really need one? Experts like Dr. Robert Malone are speaking out against them. We will also be talking about the left and its constant need to push for the culture war. And before we get started with all that, we do need to thank Rupert Murdoch, who has been funding the Box News for 20 years now. He has spent his whole life pushing for non-biased news outlets. So, thank you, Rupert. Are we on an ad break?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Hey, with our topic of vaccines, I'm just curious, did you get vaccinated?
Yep, I got vaccinated. People may watch this and decide not to get vaccinated, but that's their own choice. At least we're putting the facts out there.
I
You don't
just feel uncomfortable about it.
Why are you feeling uncomfortable? I mean, if you got vaccinated, that's your choice. You have the facts, right? Some people may choose not to get vaccinated, and that's their choice. If you don't want to work here, you can leave.
Of course I want to work here. It just feels a little bit biased how we're presenting these facts. Maybe we should also tell people that we have been vaccinated.
Don't make me tell Rupert about this, because otherwise, you know what's going to happen. Alright, wait. We're going to be back on air in a few seconds, so...
people that Trump was responsible for a lot of the vaccines.
Yeah, stop talking. Okay, cool. So something that we do have to talk about first. Some of the people that are saying that you don't need to get vaccinated, like Tucker Carlson, are most likely vaccinated. The reason why I bring this up is because many of the hosts on Fox News, which is a news source owned by Rupert Murdoch, have been questioning whether people should get vaccinated. Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity have been prominent people that have been questioning whether people should be vaccinated. Yet, Tucker Carlson in particular has neither confirmed nor denied whether he's been vaccinated, and company policy at Fox News seems to imply that he is probably vaccinated. Not to mention that Rupert Murdoch, the person who owns the New York Post, Sky News Australia, and Fox News, he has also been vaccinated. So if you are making the decision not to vaccinate based on what those news outlets say, then that's something that you should keep in mind.
Welcome back to Box News. I've talked many times on this show about COVID hysteria. And COVID, let me remind you, is a disease with a 99.98% survival rate, which is pretty good odds. And the people that do die from it generally have underlying health conditions. You're very unlikely to die if you are perfectly healthy.
So this 99.98% survival rate statistic I've heard being cited so many times, but it's only true if you have no underlying conditions. If you have underlying conditions, then your survival rate drops drastically. Are we just going to ignore the fact that people that have underlying health conditions can get the virus and are much more likely to die from the virus? But even if we just focus on healthy people can still die from it. Just because it has a low death rate for healthy people doesn't mean that that death rate is negligible. There will still be a lot of people that are perfectly healthy that die from it. I'd rather avoid those deaths. And let's not forget that there's a significant number of healthy people that still haven't recovered from COVID even though they got it a long time ago. That is another thing that I would like to avoid. Oh, I almost forgot to mention that the more cases of COVID there are, the more people are going to the hospitals because of COVID, thus taking up more resources that could be used on other people that really need it. Of course, the people with COVID really need it, but other people might really need it as well. And some people might end up dying because they can't get the help they need.
So people are saying that if you get vaccinated, you won't get COVID. But this is simply not the case. These vaccines are not 100% effective. The expert Dr. Robert Malone has even described these vaccines as leaky. It's also worth mentioning that 25% of new cases recently in Los Angeles were from vaccinated people. Does that sound like an effective vaccine to you?
So it is true that the vaccines are not 100% effective, just like no contraception is 100% effective. The idea of using contraception or of using vaccines is to reduce the risk as much as you can. It has also been found that breakthrough cases, those are cases where people have caught COVID despite being vaccinated, they have lower rates of hospitalization. People that have been vaccinated tend to have less negative effects than unvaccinated people. So not only does getting vaccinated lower your risk of actually catching COVID, it also lowers the risks of negative effects if you do catch COVID.
And you know what's funny? The left have been aggressively pushing for vaccine mandates. If they had so much faith in their vaccine and they thought that their vaccine works, couldn't they just get the vaccine and let the people that don't want to get vaccinated do what they want? It's almost like they have no faith in their vaccines.
So to this point, I'd say that breakthrough cases are a thing. If you've got a whole lot of people that are unvaccinated, they can catch COVID. And when you've got a whole lot more people with COVID, you've got higher chances of getting breakthrough cases.
So something that the mainstream media has completely ignored is the fact that Dr. Robert Malone, who is the inventor of mRNA vaccines, has come out and stated that he thinks that the vaccines are ineffective and unsafe. And he invented them.
So this is a claim that I've heard repeated so many times, that Robert Malone, who is supposedly the inventor of mRNA vaccines, has said that they are unsafe. So there are a few things to unpack here. The first is whether he invented mRNA vaccines or not. Well, he has been listed as either author or co-author on papers showing that you can inject mRNA or DNA into mice to make them encode new proteins. This certainly seems to have at least contributed to the current mRNA vaccines that we have today. However, he's not the only person to have contributed to those papers. For example, in the 1998 paper that he was the author of, Philip Felgner also contributed to the paper, and you don't see Philip Felgner speaking out about vaccines. Also, there have been many different people since 1990 that have built upon the idea and gotten it to where it is today. So even if we grant him the title of inventing the technology that allowed us to make the vaccines that we've got today, a lot has changed since then. A lot of different work has been done to improve what he was doing. It should also be noted that Robert Malone is one person saying that the vaccines are unsafe. That's not how science works. Just because one person says that it's unsafe doesn't mean that it's unsafe. You do studies. All the trials have shown that the mRNA vaccines are safe. And there are also vaccines that aren't mRNA vaccines, like the Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca vaccines.
And nobody wants to ask the question of whether these vaccines are safe, because when they do ask that question, they get shut down and they get censored, like it's George Orwell's 1984. We don't know if these vaccines have any long-term side effects. What if there are long-term side effects? We don't know that yet. Shouldn't we wait until we can confirm whether there are long-term side effects or not?
Okay, so the question here is, how long do we have to wait? Do we have to wait 9 months? Do we have to wait a year? 2 years? How long are we going to have to wait until we decide, okay, the vaccine has no long-term side effects? We could be waiting 20 years because you never know if it's going to have long-term side effects in 20 years, right? My guess would be that if someone has gotten the vaccine and there's nothing wrong with them after a month or 2 months, then there's likely going to be nothing wrong with them after a year. And even if there is something wrong with them after a year, how do you attribute that to the vaccine? But the question to ask here is, what about the long-term effects of getting COVID? Have you ever thought of that? I also need to state that the Pfizer vaccine has been approved by the FDA. So there is that.
And you know what? No one's talking about VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System. There have been thousands upon thousands of complaints to VAERS about adverse events to the vaccine, some of which being death. And you know what? I think that there's actually a lot more adverse events that are going unreported because they might go to their doctor and their doctor say, oh, this is nothing to report to VAERS about, so don't do it.
So the VAERS database system is a system that anybody who has gotten the vaccine can report a complaint to. Anybody. Just because somebody submits a complaint and that complaint is logged, that does not mean that that complaint has been verified. Being verified and being logged in the VAERS database is a completely different thing. And because our brains are pattern recognition machines that can link two unrelated events together, you could get a vaccine and then get liver failure and conclude that the vaccine gave you liver failure, even though it could have been caused by something completely different. If you get a vaccine and shortly after the vaccine you suffer liver failure, then I'm willing to bet that it's probably something to do with alcohol rather than the vaccine.
And something that's been going viral recently is people that have gotten the vaccine and found that the injection site is now magnetic. They'll stick a magnet to where they got injected and it will just stick there. That's some crazy stuff. You can find videos of it online.
So I have seen those videos where people have had magnets apparently stick to their skin after getting vaccinated. Now, one thing that you can do to verify that it's definitely because you're magnetic is to put baby powder on your skin. If it still sticks after that, then wow, you've become magnetic. Congratulations on your new superpower. But if it doesn't stick, it's just because you were sticky.
It is unclear as to why the injection site is magnetic, but a popular theory is microchips. They inject microchips into you so that you can be tracked by the New World Order.
So this is a claim that I have addressed before, but I am going to address it again here because last time I addressed it, I gave a little bit too much credence to the conspiracy side. So RFID chips are the chips that people claim are being injected by the COVID vaccine. And RFID chips have a maximum range of 200 meters. However, there's a bit more to it than just that. So the larger the range on the RFID chip, the larger the RFID chip has to be. And if you do want to get 200 meters, then you will need at least an active or semi-active RFID chip, which means that that RFID chip will need to have a battery on it. So put simply, for tracking people, RFID chips aren't that great, especially if the RFID chips are being put into vaccines, because that means that they'd have to be a lot smaller. But anyway, you probably carry one of these, which is much better at tracking you.
But one of the things that a lot of people are asking about COVID is, shouldn't we just rely on our natural immunity rather than having to get a vaccine? Wouldn't natural immunity be much stronger against COVID than a vaccine that was artificially made?
So the natural immunity argument, this argument that we can reach herd immunity for COVID, but people have to get COVID so that we can reach herd immunity. But the problem with this though is that someone who gets COVID is more at risk of catching COVID again than someone who has had both doses of the vaccine. Now, if you get COVID and then get a dose of the vaccine, I think it's about the same, but you might as well just get both doses of the vaccine.
If everyone gets vaccinated, then what's going to happen is variants are just going to come along and make the vaccines useless. They're going to have to develop completely new vaccines, and so we'll have the same cycle over and over again.
So that's not how variants are created. Variants are created by people getting the virus, and then a random mutation happens, which may make the virus more adept at survival. So in actual fact, the more unvaccinated people there are, the more variants there can be, because they will be getting more infections.
And let's not forget this myth that vaccinated people don't spread COVID. Yes, vaccinated people do spread COVID. In fact, vaccinated people that get Delta are just as infectious as unvaccinated people that get Delta.
So there's a little bit of a trick that's being utilized there. A lot of people will say that, people that are vaccinated are just as infectious as people that are unvaccinated, which is not entirely true. This only applies if you are vaccinated and have a breakthrough case. Then you're just as infectious as an unvaccinated person. But if you don't have a breakthrough case, then you're nowhere near as infectious as an unvaccinated person. And it's actually questionable as to whether you're infectious at all.
Alright, that is it for the vaccine stuff. I hope I've helped you make up your mind about this very complex issue. Anyway, on to leftists and how they're pushing a culture war. They've made Blues Clues have pride parades. What is up with that? Do they not have any decency?
So there are people that are worried that COVID is never going to go away, and there are people that use that as an excuse to just not get vaccinated. And that kind of ensures that it will never go away when you think about it. But it is possible that with enough people getting vaccinated and with the right measures, there may be a day when we don't have to worry about COVID. And I do look forward to that. However, everyone has to do their part. So here in New Zealand, recently we've had an outbreak of the Delta variant of COVID, and we've gone into level 4 lockdowns. I should point out that New Zealand doesn't have a very high vaccination rate. And it will be very interesting to see if the lockdowns here in New Zealand actually work, because there have been some good signs that they will work. Noticeably, there have been less places of interest that have been popping up recently. So if lockdowns manage to eliminate Delta here, then it is very possible that in other areas of the world, different strategies could find ways to eliminate Delta there as well. As for now, it does seem like people should probably be keeping an eye on New Zealand. Anyway, I will see you in the next video. Between you and me, thank you for watching.